Hello again. Now that we've talked about the objectives of each of the designers, now we're going to talk about the designers themselves and what they do. So our main designers are scenery designers, costume designers, sound designers, lighting designers, and sometimes projection designers. So what does the scenic designer do? Who is the scenic designer? The scenic designer is responsible for the set. So that can vary from a bare stage, doing nothing to the stage, to the extremely elaborate moving scenery that we see on Broadway. So the stage itself is usually a permanent fixture, right? The scenic designer does not design the stage. They design the set that goes on that stage. So that set may be nothing, right? It may be the bare stage itself, or it can be really elaborate. It could have things flying in. It could have lots of different drops. It could have just some furniture. It really varies depending on the needs of the production. This is called a ground plan, this image here. So a few slides ago, we talked about Lend Me a Tenor. The set, we saw two different versions of that design. This is a ground plan for Lend Me a Tenor. So it's a bird's eye view, basically, of the set. So here we have the very back of the stage, and this is the front of the stage. Look, we've got a proscenium. So we know that there's a proscenium arch, and it would go like up and over the stage. So these are the legs of the proscenium, and then it would travel across and then end right here. So then the audience would be down on this side. So here we've got a sofa and a coffee table. We saw that on both versions. We saw a bed on the stage left side. There's a chest chair, doors, windows, right? So this is what the scenic designer will draw, a ground plan to show the director and the actors and the people building the set what the set, how it's built, where everything is laid out. So who does the scenic designer collaborate with? The scenic designer, so this is the question that I asked you guys at the end of the last video. Who are some people that the scenic designer works with? Because they don't do this all on their own. So the technical director is the person that oversees the construction of the set and oversees the scene shop. So the scenic designer will make some renderings. They may make models. They may make those ground plans, so pictures or paintings of what the set looks like, and they give it over to the technical director, or the TD. And the TD is the person that makes sure that all of the drafting is correct, all of the drawings are true and to scale, and then oversees everyone that's building the set. There are also carpenters who will work in the scenic shop to make each of the set pieces, and then scenic painters have to paint it. So it goes through a series of steps. First, the technical director makes sure that the drafting is all done correctly. Then it gets sent to the carpenters to get built, and then it gets sent to the scenic painters to paint it and finish it off, and then it gets put on the stage. Our next designer is the costume designer. This is me. This is what I do for my job. So the costume designer is the person responsible for creating the costumes for the performers, or at least designing them, right? Coming up with the ideas for them. So they have to start with a thorough knowledge of the play. All the designers have to do this. They have to know the subject matter, the period that it takes place in, the specific year, what's going on that year, what are people wearing, the style of the play that will influence the cut of the fabric, or the cut of the clothing, and the type of fabrics and the colors, the point of view. We talked about this in the beginning of the semester. Is this a comic point of view, a serious point of view? What do we want the audience to think of when we watch this? And they have to intimately understand the characters more so than any of the other designers. Every single character woke up, in this imaginary world that we're all creating. They woke up that morning, they looked in their closet, and they chose what they were going to wear before going about their day. And so every single character has a backstory. Every single character has motivations for why they do the things that they do. Every character has a certain level of affluence. They may be able to afford some things. They may have to make their own clothes. They also have specific things that they're going to be doing that day. So you dress for your job. The costume designer has to be familiar with all of it, know each character inside and out so that they can choose what that character would really wear. Who does the costume designer work with? Oh, before we move to that, these are renderings. So we saw a ground plan for the scenic designer. The scenic designer can also make renderings, so like a painting of the stage. This is rendering of costume designs. Who does the costume designer work with? They have to work with people that specialize in hair and wigs, masks, and makeup. Sometimes the costume designer will design the looks of the face and the hair. Sometimes there are specific separate designers, but they have to collaborate with each other so that the hair and the makeup goes with the costume, right? You don't want the two to seem completely unrelated. The costume designer also works with drapers, tailors, and stitchers. These are the people that make the costumes. They actually sew them and then they fit them on the performers. So just as the scenic designer doesn't usually build their own set, that's the carpenters that build the set, the costume designer doesn't make their own costumes. That's the job of the people in the costume shop. Costume designer also works closely with wardrobe. So the wardrobe people are the ones that are backstage during the show, helping the actors get in and out of their costumes, and then they're doing things like laundry, and they're fixing things anytime something breaks or rips. All right, next designer, the lighting designer. What do? They know how to make the best use of the subtle and powerful medium of light. They can create effects that can be changed at will to match the mood of the action. So whereas you can't change a set just like that instantaneously, you can change the lighting. And the intensity of the light, the brightness, the colors, they all have a lot of meaning to us. So at the very basic level, stage lighting is there to make the actors visible to the audience and make the set and the costumes and the props visible to the audience. But it can do so much more than that. It can tell us if it's daytime or nighttime, if we're indoors or outdoors. It can tell us if it's a really serious scene, or if we need to focus on just one person, or if we need to focus on the whole thing. Who does the lighting designer work with? They work with, they draw a light plot, whereas the costume designer, you saw renderings for the costume designer and a ground plan for the scenic designer. A lighting designer will make a light plot, which is a map of where all the lights will be hung. Again, it's like a ground plan, it's a bird's eye view. The master electrician and the light crew then look at that light plot and they hang all of the lights according to the plot. The light board operator, or board op as we say in the biz, is the person that runs the light board during productions, and you can see a picture of the light board down here. So it's got all these knobs and controls, and there's a touchscreen computer there so that you can control where lights point, what colors they are, and what they're doing, the intensity of them. So that's a light board operator. A spotlight operator, or spot op, is there if a follow spot is used. So a follow spot is a big spotlight. You've seen those big spotlights that go in the sky, woo, like the 20th Century Fox, spotlights. Well, we have those in the theater too. These big old lights that are nice and bright. And often, even though we have electronic lights that can move around, we often have a real life person holding onto this big light. If you can see my hands. Well, they've got handles on them and pointing it at the person. It's a lot more controllable when there's a person there to actually point it because actors can be unpredictable and they can wander all around the stage and walk wherever they want to walk. So it's not as jerky as one that you uses like a joystick or something, which we do have the joystick kind. You can control that with your computer screen. But the big follow spots are much more intense. They're much brighter lights than those little joystick ones. And it's much easier to control them in person when you have a real life person that you're following. All right, our next designer is our sound designer. So the sound designer reads the script, just like any designer does, and they take note of any requirements in the play for sound or any requirements requested by the director. So if it says in the script, a car pulls up outside, but we don't see the car, we just know that the car pulls up and maybe one of the actors is like, oh, Dad must be home. Then the sound designer has to find a sound or make a sound and record it of wheels of a car on gravel, right? Pulling up and getting closer. Or maybe the beep beep if someone honks outside to say that they're here. It might be birds chirping. It might be crickets chirping. There are any number of sounds that are required from plays. So they have to figure out kind of what ambient sounds they want just to help set the tone, to figure out if they want pre-recorded music that might help transitions or the beginning and the end. So anything that the script requires or anything that the director wants. So we have two, I'm going to go back actually. There's two different types of sounds that happen in theater. Live amplification, and that is either amplifying a band, if there's a band playing, like with a musical, or amplifying the actors if they need microphones. And then there's also pre-recorded sound, so that's like the sound effects. We can also do amplification of live sound effects, which requires a Foley artist, which is also sometimes used in film and radio. But that's the person you may have seen like with shoes walking on gravel, or clinking a glass, or doing different things. They would be off stage, and the sound designer would amplify them. All right, people that the sound designer works with is the sound engineer. So that's the person that actually does the mixing. The sound designer designs what they want everything to sound like, and the engineer makes sure that it mixes well. They select the right equipment, the right speakers, the right microphones to produce that various sound elements that's required. They install it, they test it, and they usually run the show. The mixer is someone who mixes live music and voices during a show. All right, so next we have some discussion groups. Since we're not in person, we're not going to divide it into small groups, but I want to hear your take on it. So here we go. If your own room were a stage, what would the audience think of the inhabitant? What kind of clothes would they see? What would the set look like? What would it sound like? These are things that if your room was a stage, there would be designers choosing what it looked like. So if your room were set on stage, what would that tell the audience? We'll pick up the rest of these questions in real life, in class. Thank you so much for going on this journey with me. Hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next class.